Hello there. We are glad to have you on board again on this show that focuses on development, issues that concern you, stories that transform lives. I'm your host, Alex Chamwada. Today, we discuss matters agriculture. And once again, the world came to Nairobi this time round for the Africa Green Revolution Forum 2016. We will tell you what the forum was all about, the status of agriculture in Africa, and where is Kenya in that mix. But first, here is our fact sheet. The African Green Revolution Forum, AGRF, is an annual gathering of policymakers aimed at boosting attention on the transformation of agriculture in Africa and securing investments that will ensure better life for millions of Africa's farmers and families. Organized by the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, it's held annually with this year's theme being Seize the Moment. The first such forum was held in 2010 in Accra, Ghana. After Kenya, the next country to host it is Cote d'Ivoire. In the campaign for a green revolution in Africa, the key areas of focus include managing soils, proper use of fertilizer, the role of technology, investment in certified seeds, the role of the youths, as well as embracing climate-smart agriculture. Meanwhile, a new report released by AGRA indicates that a decade of intense domestic attention to farmers and food production has generated the most successful development effort in African history. It says the countries that made the biggest investments were rewarded with sizable jumps in both farm productivity and overall economic performance. There you are, and experts say Africa is getting greener and greener, and smallholder farmers have more money in their pockets now. So let's understand, where did all this campaign begin? Green Revolution on the continent. I spoke to the first president of the African Green Revolution Forum, Dr. Namanga Ngongi.
10 years ago, or just before 10 years ago, Africa was in a transition. African heads of state had met in Maputo and agreed to and committed themselves to increasing investments in agriculture. They committed themselves to give 10% of their budgets to agriculture, to raise agricultural production by 6% to 6.2% per annum, okay, and to create as much jobs as they could in the agricultural sector, for agriculture to be a driver for overall economic growth. That encouraged some donors, some philanthropists, some foundations to consider whether it was not time to partner with Africa to fulfill this ambition. AGRA was created in 2006. Okay, it started functioning in 2007. I joined at the end of 2007. Okay? So we were already going through to recruit staff from the beginning, to have a strategy, to have a plan, to have. So you did need to convene people, bring people together to explain what this green revolution was, because there was a lot of controversy, thinking that it was a photocopy of the Asian Green Revolution, having hybrid seed, GMO, high levels of fertilizer, destroying the environment. There was a lot of fear. So we needed to create a forum to bring people together, all stakeholders, for as many as possible, and we did the first AGRF in Accra, in Ghana, in 2010.
What is the biggest success?
The biggest success has been really in mobilizing international opinion, building on what CADAP had built, on making agriculture a thematic thing that people can feel at ease to discuss.
Are African governments doing well in terms of the target, allocating 10% of their budgets to agriculture?
The 10% target has not been met. They are now somewhere between 3.5%, 4 to 5%. There are some countries that are around 8% to 10%, okay? But that's a small minority of countries.
The 6th African Green Revolution Forum at the UN complex in Nairobi was attended by high-profile decision makers from both the private and public sector, including former and current heads of state. Here is a recap of some of the speeches that were delivered during the forum.
This year's AGRF is about really engaging the people we are supposed to be engaging with, our heads of states, who care the most about the people we are trying to move. They have the mandate to bring prosperity to these people.
We need to seize the moment because agriculture is the main topic, not only in Kenya, but also in Africa and in the world. And this is the opportunity when we need to take agriculture to the next level.
And every day, farmers are proving how much they can achieve when given access to high-quality seeds, fertilizers, and indeed market access.
Governments and government institutions, we must really increasingly look at ourselves as having maybe a big share to do on our part, because in the end we have a certain age that allows us to create the right environment in which these other players, even the private sector, actually can play a more important role.
Let's go practical now. And one of the issues that are coming out of this forum is that farmers should embrace climate-smart agriculture. In Machakos, farmers are being empowered to plant crops that are drought-resistant. Let's understand how through the following report by Levis Musumba.
Climate change is becoming a global nightmare, resulting to drought, famine, and food insecurity, with about 40 million people in Africa remaining under food relief. A UN report states. Alan Mackenzie from Machakos County, a semi-arid region, is a smiling farmer as he makes a bulky harvest every passing season. A relief food remains a tale to him. As we drive into his home, we found Alan busy sorting maize he recently harvested, and a smile on his face shows how happy he is to have visitors this afternoon. After many years of over-reliance on traditional methods of farming leading to poor crop yields, Alan decided to go modern, adopting the use of drought-resistant seeds from Dryland Seed Limited Company.
The difference between the KDV4 and what we used to have before is you know, that speed of growth and maturity, and also higher yield compared to the traditional way we used to plant.
Farmers need a credit scheme. They need awareness because, as you know, the finance institutions have been very expensive with very high interest rates. So we hope that the intervention by the government to lower interest rates is going to encourage farmers to start borrowing to invest in agriculture.
3 years ago, with the 2.5 acres of land, he could only make about 1 ton of maize in a good harvest. But now he harvests 3 tons of maize from the same piece of land, which is 3 times more.
It's very important for farmers to, to time the planting time, as well as to time, how to add this additional, say, fertilizer, so that the plant matures at exactly, between 75 to 90 days because of the short rains that we experience in these regions.
Following a better harvest, he also had to improve on post-harvest management. Alan now stores the harvest in airtight storage bags, which can last for more than a year. Since the introduction of drought-resistant seeds to farmers in drought-affected regions, farmers like Alan can afford to put a meal on the table, as well as make a coin from the sales of farm produce. If this can be replicated across the country, then Kenya will be food sufficient. For the Chamwada report, I am Levis Musumba.
Still on matters agriculture, the role of development partners cannot be ignored. Millions and millions of dollars have been pumped into the sector. I asked the USAID Administrator, Gail Smith, is it worth it?
One of the things we found early on in President Obama's administration was that assistance and funding for agriculture had fallen dramatically, whether it was foreign assistance from donors, investments from governments, or private capital. So President Obama, early, 6 weeks into his administration, called for a global food security initiative. That became Feed the Future. We built Feed the Future and that whole initiative, interestingly, on a lot of what was happening in Africa. In particular, leaders had agreed in Maputo in 2003 to increase spending on agriculture. Also, and significantly, they had agreed that countries needed to have comprehensive food security plans. So in partnership with government, civil society, the AU, experts, researchers, the private sector across the continent, we started Feed the Future, and we've seen dramatic results in what, 5, 6, 7 years is a relatively short time. We've seen decreases in stunting, so improvements in the lives of children, but that also translates into the well-being of a community and a country, reductions in poverty, increased capital flows from the private sector into agriculture. So I think it's well worth it. All of that said, I think the challenges before us remain very large and very urgent because we're nowhere near done yet.
When implementing these programs, for you, what is the biggest challenge?
I think the challenges are, one is scale. When you look in agriculture, for example, at the demographics of a lot of developing countries, including Kenya, where you've got a growing young population that wants and needs jobs. We've got to pick up the pace, build on what we know works, but get to scale quickly, which means we need to bring more partners on board. Your president, for example, challenged the banks to put capital into the mix so smallholder farmers could get loans more easily. The great news is the banks stood up and responded. But we've got to do more of that. We've got to get more commitments from all the partners we need and go faster and further.
Also important in this debate to transform agriculture in Africa is the involvement of the youths and the use of technology. What exactly are you doing to support these two areas?
One is we've upped and increased our investments in research and development across the board. Those had fallen down dramatically, including with African partners, but also American universities, laboratories, and others. Second, we're supporting entrepreneurs who've got some terrific ideas, many of them, if not most of them, driven by the smart application of often simple technologies. How do we support them, get them the finance they need in the initial stages so they can demonstrate enough success to go to scale? And we've seen a lot of that work with the combination of, for example, smartphones and mechanized tractors. If you can combine these technologies so that people can access mechanization, it's pretty simple. It's simple technology. It's technology that people use. On the youth side, I think that's another of our challenges. And we are doing a lot on that. A lot of our entrepreneurs, most of them are young people. But I think we all need to do more to demonstrate the viability of the agricultural sector to young people who are looking for opportunities to create businesses, create jobs, and have jobs themselves.
Talking about governance, how is it linked to the success of these programs you've mentioned?
There are a couple things on governance. One, there's an effectiveness, efficiency piece. If a government doesn't govern well or have the capacity or the skills and the institutions and capabilities that are needed, we can't together implement these programs effectively. But the other thing is governance, particularly when it's good, is the thing that builds confidence of citizens, of donors, of the private sector, and of partners, and it's key to ensuring sustainability. If we govern well, and governance isn't something that we just think is important in Kenya or in Africa, it's important to us in the United States. If we govern well, we can sustain our gains and sustain the confidence of our public. If we don't govern well, we can't have those things. So we got to be transparent. We've got to be accountable. We've got to be able to make mistakes and admit it and learn from them. So governance is, in many ways, it's kind of like the architecture that cuts across everything we're doing.
We take a short break. When we return, why Ethiopia, once known for hunger, is now doing well in food security. And is GMO the answer to Africa's food security challenges? Right after the break. Welcome back. Now, Nairobi this week played host to the African Green Revolution Forum. In this show, we are discussing the status of agriculture on the continent. Let's unpack it further through the eyes of food security advisor, Dr. James Nyoro. You've mentioned Ethiopia. So exactly what has Ethiopia done? What lessons can be learned from Ethiopia?
It starts with political goodwill. Ethiopia, the late Prime Minister Meles diagonized agriculture, and he said he's going to have an industrial-led agriculture sector. The agriculture sector will lead the industrial development. And therefore, the first thing that he did was to allocate resources. He was way ahead of the Maputo target of 10%. So he allocated a lot of resources to agriculture that went to rural infrastructure, that went to extension. They have one of the biggest battalion of extension of 66,000 people. The second one, which is very, very important, is to coordinate the sector. Agriculture sector is the only sector that will require the goodwill of the other ministries. The third thing is to hold people accountable. The Prime Minister was, and even the Prime Minister today, holds every quarter a meeting of all the rural sector ministries through what is called Agriculture Transformation Agency. He holds them accountable, and they are given milestones, and they come back and report what has been done.
What cash crops or what can be found in Ethiopia? We're talking about agriculture.
Teff is some kind of like wheat. So that's their staple food. But mainly, we are talking about coffee. Ethiopia has been a leader in coffee production for a long time. They are very well organized on cooperatives. Coffee is a major sector bringing in foreign exchange. They sell their coffee in the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, which is what Kenya used to do at the Kenyan coffee auction, but then we somehow along the way went into other ways. So coffee is a major commodity. Remember, floriculture. Ethiopia has been penetrating into exports of floriculture, including exporting now to the destinations that we were exporting. Their export-led strategy is very, very clear. But then maize, wheat, they have come in and producing large quantities of beans. Then, of course, livestock. Ethiopia is very well known for livestock.
GMO has been a debatable subject. Is GMO the answer to Africa's food security challenges?
GMO, the genetically modified foods, it is necessary, but it is not sufficient to tackle Africa's food problems. What do I mean? It is necessary because you cannot stop the technology. There are some problems that are afflicting Africa that are only inherent in Africa because we are in the tropics. So when it comes to pests, whether it is stem borer in maize, when it comes to cotton and all of that, there are pests that we are experiencing more in Africa than in other areas. And the technology, you cannot stop it. So you need that technology in order to overcome some of those problems. However, if your adoption of even the conventional technologies is so low, we are talking about farmers using their traditional seed instead of the improved seed. The solution is not automatically GMO. GMO is a process where I would say is the icing on the cake. Once you have adopted these other technologies and you have gotten to the marginal returns where it's negative, there is diminishing returns, then to shift very quickly, you need to move to the GMO. So I would say it's necessary but not sufficient. Africa right now requires, first of all, for us to move with the conventional facilities, varieties, and technologies as we think about GMO.
What are the challenges and how can they be addressed?
If you look at Kenya, we are very good in terms of flower exports. Our horticulture is doing very well. Tea, all of that, the exports and so on. But in food, we are not doing well at all. On an annual basis, Kenya will spend 130 billion shillings to import food. That is 1.3 billion shillings. The whole of Africa spends about 40 billion shillings. So 1.5 of that is from Kenya. What does it mean? We are getting about 10% of our maize from outside the country. Okay? Tanzania is feeding us, Uganda is feeding us. In terms of wheat, we can only produce about 30% of our consumption. 70% we are importing. Rice, we at best can do a quarter. 3 quarters, we are importing from countries like Pakistan and others. Sugar, we are importing about 40%. So importing 40%. So to a large extent, although we can say to a large extent that Kenya is food secure, we are not food secure because we have been able to produce ourselves. Because we have not been able to put in mechanisms that will exploit the production to meet the consumption.
Are projects like Gharana the answer?
Gharana is an answer, and it is a very, very bold step. The gap between production and consumption, it is so huge that our small-scale farmers can only contribute a small proportion, and they need to do that. But Gharana will come in and they will bridge that gap very quickly.
But there are doubts on its is it doable? Is it a white elephant?
It is doable. Gharana is a long-term investment program. It's not short-term. We need to do dams. Dams will require about 3-4 years to fill. We need to put in infrastructure so that the private sector will come in and open it. It's only that people know that Gharana is a 1 year or 2 year or 1 term of the presidency. No, Gharana is a long-term program, but we were probably very ambitious when we said $1 million and people expected $1 million the following day. I must also say that the feedback that the people, Kenyans get from the progress in Gharana has not been very good, but it is the way to go. There has always been fear that if Gharana works, then we are going to displace all our small-scale farmers in North Rift. Our small-scale farmers, the farms are becoming smaller and smaller, and the opportunity is for them to move out of maize production because it's a low-value crop. The best you can do in Bugoma is to make probably 40,000 shillings per acre in the whole year because they do only one crop. Within that season, if you are doing tomatoes, or if you are doing French food, or if you are doing fruits, you could make 200, 300,000. So the objective of having projects like Gharana and others are to make sure that our small-scale farmers are moving. So it must be done in tandem with moving our small-scale farmers from low-value food production into higher-value crops, the kind of things that you see happening in central Kenya.
That's where we end today's show. We discussed the status of agriculture in Africa following the African Green Revolution Forum that took place at the United Nations offices in Gigiri. We are glad you are part of the show. We value your contribution. And until we meet again next week, same time, same channel, bye-bye for now.